So thank you for coming to this CNR event. So I'm going to introduce Lucinda Jarrett, who I've known for, I don't know, 10 to 20 years, somewhere in that, somewhere in that range. And I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with Lucinda. I've been in her incredible orbit and energy. She has an absolute passion for how you integrate the arts into healthcare, which is a very interesting area. So Lucinda, she's not only the artistic director of Rosetta Life, she basically is Rosetta Life. So if you go to their website and you see all of the incredible content, some of which we're going to see today, they basically all come out of here, out of her head, which is, I think, you're one of the most productive people that I've ever met in this, in the field of academia and producing work. So it's a real privilege to have you here, and I hope that probably all of you will get a chance to have a chat with Lucinda afterwards, and some of that energy will rub off on you and maybe come up with some nice new collaborations, although she's got enough work on as it is, Lucinda.
Well, thank you. It's not all on my own. There are shed loads of people who help me, three of whom are right here, and Pauline has been here since the beginning of our journey, and Mel is my partner in arms. So I'm going to start. I started working in the field of arts and health in 1997, so I thought it might be interesting for you if I gave you a bit of an overview of the growth of that field, where our work fits in it, and then how our work's grown, and where it fits into the mire and morass of creative arts and health that exists today. Does that sound like... Thank you. Okay. So, to start with, the field of arts and health is relatively new. It began in... You can either say it's relatively new, or you could say that, in fact, health is an art practice and an art form. I always think the best nurses are that make the best artists, and the best artists would make the best nurses. And for many people, the art of healthcare is an art form. But arts and health began in the 70s with a man called Peter Senior, who began introducing arts into healthcare in Liverpool. I made my first foray into arts and health in 1997. I was working at the BBC, and forgive me if you've heard this story before, and as a science producer, and we were filming a series of films with Steve Jones about the impact of genetics on the world. And we went to look at the impact of genetics on Native Americans in Alaska. And there was a man who hired a boat and took me out in the sunset to shed tears and weep as he told me about how his whole community was dying in the weight of drug addiction and alcohol. And we got it to the cutting room floor, and the editor and series producer said, "Zap, click, factor, cut him." And his tears and his emotion and his heart was left on the cutting room floor because he had a slight squint, and they calculated that an audience would just zap and click because they wouldn't watch the squint. So in that moment, I decided I wanted to make films for an audience of one, where the person who was telling me the film was our first audience. And we began our work in hospice care. And the idea was that anyone who was at the end of their life might want to tell a story that mattered to them. And in so doing, they would find meaning out of the stories that they told. And in palliative care, I learnt everything that we apply today, and I'll share that with you later. But in that moment of the first person whose story I listened to, who was an elderly man who, in 1997, wanted to reconnect with the spirituality of his youth. And I was working with a movement therapist, and he put us both through rebirthing, and as a way of reconnecting to his own youthful spiritual practice. And I remembered in that moment I was absolutely both audience and participant. And that's how we have carried our journey through. We are both the audience for the stories that we hear, but we're also practically engaged in shaping them with the people we work with. And we, from the beginning, we also never wanted to hear a whole person's story, but were always interested in moments of being. And moments of being are about moments where it comes from Virginia Woolf, and the idea is that there are moments where you see incredible clarity, and it could be a moment like Mrs. Dalloway has as she prepares for a party, or it could be a moment of reflection on the top of a mountain or swimming across a lake, as Nick's wife did last week. They're just moments where you have time for reflection and recognise with clarity what's important to you in life. So those were the moments we sought. And what was interesting was I remember a man, most often in the hospice world, people would say to me, "Oh, I can write my life on the back of a postage stamp. I've got nothing to say." But when you dive into a moment, the postage stamp becomes a page, becomes an album, becomes a novel that unfurls from a single moment. And I'm sure you've all heard those stories that are just magic when you listen. And it's a fragment of time that just enables you to look into a life. So that was our mantra. And we, from the beginning, innovation, or trying to do things differently, was important. So we set up digital life stories when digital cameras were big blocks that mirrored real cameras, and we created a network of 20 hospices. But if you don't have a practice, or a technique, for want of a better word, you only have an idea, and the idea gets very quickly bastardized. And so our idea of moments of being told through the stories of the body that unfold with an audience of one that becomes millions, very quickly, in the hands of volunteers, became a box full of photos that I would be sent and be asked to scan and create a book out of, which was the inverse of what we'd intended. Because instead of listening with someone, we were just sent boxes. So I realised that actually what we needed was to understand the magic that happened between movement, filmmaking and art and listening, and develop a practice. And that moment, the opportunity for that happened when my dad had a catastrophic stroke in 2007. And he was told by the doctor, and I don't think anyone would do this now, but they said 55% of his brain has been damaged and he's a vegetable. Switch off his life support machine now. And my mother was sobbing down the phone to me. My brother was in the room, and my brother started singing My Lady in Red, which is a very famous Chris Rea song that they always played at their parties and danced to. And my dad started humming it. And it was an extraordinary moment because he could have chosen to die. In humming it, we knew that he'd heard what the doctor had said, and he'd recognised in that instant that he wanted to live. But he couldn't speak, and he never spoke, but he always sang. And they communicated together, my dad and my mother, through song. She would ring him from the office and sing, "I just called to say I loved you." They would ring Stevie Wonder, "Hello, Goodbye," and the Beatles. And this was their way of communicating a single fragment of a song. So I knew in that moment that song had reached my father, but I couldn't sing, and I still can't sing, and movement is my practice. And I thought, I'm sure that we could introduce a practice that combined movement on the hospital wards. So I met Nick and I danced at the place with Fran for 3 days, and we then introduced that practice here at the National Hospital in 2010, and we had an ongoing residency here for about 8 years. And the interesting thing about that was that we learned that movement was a really valid way of enabling people to connect to each other, and also an extraordinary way of enabling people to find a freedom. Now, time and time again, people talk about freedom, and I don't know what that freedom is. So I'm waving to Eunice, not sparkling my hands. But I don't know what that freedom is. Sometimes I think it's about freedom to escape the rigour and ardour of rehab. It could be freedom to be in a moment of flow. It could be the freedom to realise that there's a moment where you can do something from capacity instead of incapacity. But everyone talks about that moment of freedom and movement. The other things that people said it was relaxing, and it was something that you could do. We knew it was really important that we were working from capacity, because that's what the arts do. We're not trying to fix a problem. We encourage people to do what they can and grow that. And that was really important. Everybody said, I could do it. And the other thing that people told us again and again was that it was something new. And again, in all the research that I'll share over the years, this idea of doing something new became really important. So in 2015, we had a really remarkable opportunity, an incredible gift of 3-year practice research to explore what could we offer a stroke and brain injured community. And we said we wanted to genuinely co-design it. And we said, it was our first foray into research. There's an interesting story in that the reason I did a PhD was because we had funding for the research. It was a research grant. But the researchers said, we'll only do this if we don't have to go through ethics. So I had to register for a PhD just to get their research through ethics, which I did. And the point was that that this research grant, awarded us by the amazing Nikki Crane, was simply to understand what we could offer. We didn't know what the outcomes were, and it was genuine co-design. Can you imagine anyone nowadays giving you £250,000? We said, we don't know what we're going to do, but we know it'll be genuinely co-designed and co-produced, and we'll share the outcomes. It was incredible. And the first film I want to show you, that you'll see people in the audience here 10 years ago. It's our 10th anniversary this year, which is why it's it was 2010, so it's 15 years since we're on the wards of the hospital. But since we developed this performance arts program, it's 10 years old this year. So 10 years ago, we began this program, and I'm just going to show you the very first film we made, which I think is this one, yeah. Hopefully you can see it.
I just wanted to ask what you would say to other people who've had a stroke about the benefits of what this has meant to you.
So this workshop we've been going for, I have gained a lot from it. Why? Because you are able to express yourself.
I wanted to thank all the organizers for this program. I wish I will be there next year too to continue with them, because it's a lovely thing. It makes us know more people.
Fun and excitement, and I suppose improving your performance abilities as well.
So I think all those concepts together, and concentration as well, again, it's training the brain.
I think the show proved to me that, and everybody else I would hope, that you can actually make a recovery. But you have to do it yourself, you have to want to do it. That's the thing. I think everybody here who was in the performance, they wanted to do it. They wanted to be part of something.
That's it. Really just waking up the body.
Facilitators were fantastic because they honoured our input and let us grow, and they were flexible. That's why I dream able body, yes I do.
The sessions would have been all right on their own. We benefited from the session, but giving a performance, you gain confidence.
They put too much food in your mouth.
To actually be involved on the night with my new friends in something that was of that quality and that good, it was just a wonderful experience.
When I see the size of that stage, it was frightening, and we all performed together. But to have other people there with us, NHS, who we'd never met before, never performed with before, and we all seemed to perform wonderful together.
So that took you through 10 years. You saw here in the front row Pauline, who's here, said, I want to come back next year. 10 years later, she's now a trustee of Rosetta Life and is still here. So I want to just explain a bit about what we did over the last 10 years. So we discovered in that, what did we discover in that co-design process? The really interesting thing was that I thought people just wanted to dance. Everybody loved dancing on the hospital. Let's just move and we'll reconnect with our bodies, reconnect with what we can do, find a bit of freedom, a bit of capacity, discover something new, and everything will be all right. But it was performance that was really important. It's being seen, first by an artist you might tell a story to, then your community, and then a public audience, which can be in a community theatre or at Garsington Stage. And this mechanism of performance, if people ask me, what's the magic in the art? I always say it's the moment of performance, because you have to stand on the stage. You have to perform yourself. So our practice is always about, we don't stage Lear or Shakespeare or Hamlet, but in performing yourself, you find a new identity. So your story is what's most important and is what's told. And I think that, so we discovered that. The other thing we discovered that was really interesting is that we couldn't just, we couldn't just translate what we loved as artists. So I love John Cage's graphic scores. So this is a graphic score from Cage's music book. And if you were to draw that in a room, I'm going to ask Mel to do it because I didn't sing. But can I ask you, Mel, do you mind singing that? Which one? This one. No. Sure. Thank you. So I think these are really fun and playful. I think if we took those into the ward, it's democratizing composition. But actually, what people found was that what we call playful can sometimes be infantilizing. And no one wanted to just sing the arc of a curve. They wanted complex songs written by composers. And that was fascinating to me, because what I call play is the line between playful and infantilizing when you've had a stroke is quite fine, because actually things can become silly because you feel as though you can't do everything. So you have to up the ante and go the other way. Like even, this is another Cage score that I love, and we tried this, do you remember? But actually, people walked away from it and did not enjoy the idea of that becoming music, which to me is an extraordinary liberating joy. So we knew that performance was important, but we knew that play couldn't be infantilized, or anything that edged on that we couldn't introduce. But what we also found was that if you give people the right kind of structure, if we all take people through a 12-week program where you build kinship, you build community, you build trust and safety, you devise a process, then you rehearse it and perform it, actually, it's the beginning for many people. It's the beginning of a journey of recovery. It's not the end. It's not like CBT where you say 6 sessions and you're done. And that's huge in healthcare because everyone says you can't hold on to people. They get better. You go through a pathway and then go on. But if we can take people through a journey and then keep helping them recover and we grow with it, then surely that's the right thing to do. So we dive deeper and deeper into the practice. We offered the ambassadors training. They became emerging artists who supported us in the hospitals. Pauline at St Thomas's, Eunice came into St Thomas's, and you were at Chelsea and Westminster. And they're emerging artists who not only assist us in the hospitals, but they're a huge asset. If I've got to stay near this microphone, which is really troubling me because I don't want to. But if I walk into the wards like this and say, come and dance with me, and you've just had a stroke, you're completely within your own mind, lying flat on your back, feeling extraordinary fatigue. You've done an hour of physio, you've done an hour of speech therapy. You really don't want to see this person and dance with her, to say no. But Pauline comes next to me and says, come, you're not going to get better unless you get out of bed and come, and it'll make you feel better. Eunice says, I'm not going until you get out of your bed. Come and join us. And she stands there until people get up. And so if an ambassador is there, then they think, okay, they've got better, they've gone home, and then they'll join us. And they also notice when we've gone on too long. They say they're too tired. Stop now. So they're really assistants. They notice things that we don't notice. They bring people with energy and love into the sessions and also help us with the tasks and model the exercises in the hospitals. They also advocate for the program. They model it everywhere we go. And they have now undergone a training program and are launching their very own disabled-led performance company called Beyond the Odds, which is quite extraordinary. And the same has happened wherever we've replicated it. So in Donegal, there is now the Yellow Ladder Theatre Company, which is stroke-led. And in Reading, they model the programme on the wards. They run an ambassadors cafe monthly, and they also have their own performance company called the Red Roaring Raspberries, I think. It's led by a clown. They also engage with applied dance, and I'll take you through some photos I hope I've got now. Yeah, come back to that one. So this is Eunice performing, and that moment of performance that is so transformative, I think is really, really clear there. This is the ambassadors performing in Queen Square last summer, and with a piece that looked at the experience of time. And what the ambassadors have done, the ambassadors are our alumni, these graduates who keep on delving deeper and deeper and learning more. They work with students from London Contemporary Dance, where we started in 2010, and every year they run a community commission. The ambassadors run it with the students. And the students are remarkable, and they stretch you and encourage you to do things that you might not. Would you agree? Yeah. And you also offer them. What the interesting thing is, what the students say in feedback is dance has become so technique driven and so much about perfection, they've forgotten the love of why they entered it in the beginning. And with the ambassadors, they remember the joy and love of dancing, because that's why we dance, for the joy and love of it. So that's them dancing here. This is the hospital passion play. So people dance from the wards, and we filmed them live. And it was a live performance with a live click track. So what that means is it was streamed from the hospital, and the guy who was conducting had their track and the track in his ear, so that when it ended, he could bring people in on beat. So it was quite a remarkable performance. And that was with the Stroke Odysseys choir, Garsington Adult Opera, and a laryngectomy choir with people with no voices. And then this is a program we did really recently with language students from Grinnell College who came over for a week just to work with the ambassadors and find out through movement and the joy of dancing more understanding of what you gain when you lose language. And this is the ambassadors working with the place students again. So at the end of it, at the end of this program, it's not a pipeline. It's not like CBT. It's not like 6 sessions of something you go through. It's a really organic network. People get referred, they go through a program, they have training, they become ambassadors, and then they join monthly masterclasses, refer people, buddy people. They join a national network through newsletters. But it's a messy kind of organic network that enables people to dive in wherever they want and to keep learning and keep growing. So what is the field that we exist in today? Where does this exist in the field of arts and health? So arts and health today is a complex area. So after the work that began in the 1970s, then we introduced life stories into hospices. Then Susan Waller got a huge grant called Enhancing the Healing Environment, because everybody understands that, don't we? We understand murals on hospital walls, even if they can be pretty ghastly sometimes. You know, it's bound to be better than a grey wall. So we understand, and it doesn't threaten staff. So Enhancing the Healing Environment grew rapidly and reached 250 hospitals. And visual arts on the whole have always had traction, and music therapy. But where does this program fit in that messy network? And how does it grow and how does it work? So in hospitals, we run sessions on the gym. The ambassadors support us. Then in the community, we have the performance arts program. And then the ambassadors grow and develop through their own intentions, like the performance company Beyond the Odds, or continuing their own training. But the key is, as we've grown, the field of arts and health, and art therapy and music therapy, of course, sits alongside it, has grown one way. And there's a kind of mushrooming, as I'm sure you know, of social prescribing. So what social prescribing does is it says it works best with this idea of a pipeline of sessional delivery, because a GP refers an individual to a pathway that they can go through. It doesn't allow for what I call a transformational program. So in a sense, by finding a way to enable the arts to become prescribed, to grow massively in healthcare, the artists have also taken the art away. And arts and health is now known as creative health, where the adjective to healthcare, I think, says everything. And I believe that we lose the imagination at the heart of arts and health. So I did something that I found amusing. This is a social prescribing pathway. And you'll see, this is from Bromley, and you'll see that there's this person, it's all individually tailored. Here's a person with complex needs. That person gets referred to a program and is meant to then go out into the world. So I asked ChatGPT to put arts at the centre of it and ask them what happens, and I fed it loads of stuff. And of course you get this, which is interesting because it recognises that you need society there to feed the creativity, but it's got nowhere for it to go in a social prescribing pathway, but back to the individual with complex needs. So that model of, I said we need all this to meet that, but it doesn't allow that creativity of making to then go into the world and come out of the world. The community is too messy. Does that make sense? Some nods, some nods. What I mean is, if you have a GP taking one individual, say do this, with the view you go there, that's simple. If you say, I need art, music, dance, performance, I need all these things, all the arts to feed in to a program where we're bringing everybody together and we can guarantee that they will meet an audience and a wider audience, it doesn't fit that model because it's an individually tailored program. And what happens with an individually tailored program is ultimately, unfortunately, is it becomes very middle class. It does the opposite of what it's intended to. It relies on you providing your own transport. It becomes a program like horticulture in Reading. Everybody who goes to the horticulture program in Reading has a wonderful time planting flowers. And this is creative social prescribing. Whereas what I believe the arts do is they offer you the imagination to dream differently, to dream of a life differently, to find a new way. And you're not going to get it by planting seeds in the earth. You might get something, but you're not going to get the transformation. You get a bit of community because you can go and have a cup of tea afterwards, but you're not going to get a community that's driven together to make a huge production that will then enable you to talk about it for years to come. However, some people have found ways that are really trying to challenge and question social prescribing. And forgive this, it was a screenshot from a Zoom call because I really like that image. And this is from Gloucester, and Gloucester has Gloucester has pioneered all this work. Simon Ofer, who's now an MP and heads the All-Parliamentary Working Party for Arts and Health, started prescribing poetry as a GP in Gloucester in the 90s. And what they say is it's mirroring what I was trying to talk about, that you need an enabling infrastructure. You need everybody for creative health, everybody in the community to understand it. And it brings volunteering, fundraising, best practice. Then you need the social infrastructure, which is the arts and the healthcare all working together. And then at the centre is then co-produced, co-designed, brilliant practice. But it's not a line, it's the whole community working together. So when we are working at Old Diorama Arts Centre, we know that we can devise a programme that we can perform at Queen Square, where some staff can come down, patients walking around the garden can see it, that we can have the resource of the students at the place who can come and support the programme and the performance, that Camden will give us the space for free and give us chairs and because they want to see the parks animated, and that the volunteers will support it on their green social prescribing. That begins to be more of that enabling infrastructure and the creative programme that I think is so essential. So after this amazing co-design programme, that was led by Guy's and St Thomas's charity, where we co-designed the programme, delivered it, then we replicated it to show that we knew what we were doing. We then were really fortunate to be part of a 3-year programme that enabled us to learn what we needed to do if we wanted to upscale it. And that was called Shaper. And it was funded by the Wellcomes Trust and delivered by King's College London. And this is what we learned. So when I talk about the enabling infrastructure, that's what I call co-production. So these words are bandied around. Co-design is about an idea. So co-design is actually making the idea with people, not coming in with something and testing it, but making it with people. Then co-production is how it's made, and that relies on the arts sector, the health sector, the place to help us design it, make it. It relies on the health sector, being engaged for referrals and understanding it. It relies on commissioners funding it. It relies on artists wanting to be trained and wanting to engage. It relies on the voluntary sector, the stroke. It's the co-production is all the partners coming together to make it happen. And then the practice at the heart of it, I use the word devising, is co-creation, by which I mean we devolve the authority. And that's what I'm going to try and show you now. Sorry, it's just not playing out. So what I wanted to say in the last 5 minutes was about co-creation, because we all talk about co-creation in the arts, and it's actually really, really, really difficult. Because when you make theatre, you want one person to have a vision to drive it through. If you genuinely devolve authority to everybody in the company, it takes a very, very, very long time because every decision has to be shared genuinely. So the performance that we are working on now with the new company, we started working on a year ago. And each step of every line is agreed, every scene is agreed. And I learnt about taking this time when I went to Australia on a Churchill Fellowship to work with back-to-back theatre. And they spend 3 years making their shows. They devise it, they talk, they devise more. We will never have 3 years funding from ACE or the Arts Council, but we can genuinely take the time to bring people with us. So on Monday, as a really good example, a visual artist came in, and instead of coming in with her ideas for projections, which is what happened in 2018, she took everybody through not only all the different ideas, but the thinking behind all the different ideas, then asked everybody for all their input into each image she was putting together, and reframed it and rethought it in the space of the rehearsal time. Now that took us a long time. It took up all our rehearsal time, but it meant that every image is genuinely owned by each person in the room. So to give you in theatre, some people talk about devising theatre where they mean they offer people a task, everybody responds, and the director will then select what he wants and frame it and block it and choreograph it. But genuine devising, devolving all authority to the shared collective, takes a huge amount of time. But the outcome is massive because everybody comes out of that with shared agency and ownership, which is absolutely huge. Everybody is taking the time to speak. People who I've never heard speak before are now speaking because they know their voice is heard. People who've never had a word for 5 years are genuinely framing sentences because their voice and agency is heard. So where does this work fit in the landscape of arts and health? It doesn't easily fit into social prescribing, but all the language that we're using in healthcare of co-production, co-design, lived experience, all that is embraced. Even our research is all co-produced with researchers. Nobody does things to people, but with people. And the importance of that is simply that for 3 pieces of independent research, I have witnessed researchers come in, take people through really complicated questionnaires that I don't understand. When did you not feel depressed? Now, to me, that's a double negative before you begin. Can you not just reframe that as what makes you feel happy? But no, you've got to have this transition from incapacity to capacity. So when did you feel depressed? When did you not feel depressed? When did you not understand what people were saying to you? Really complex questions. And then, do the participants ever see the results of the research? No. How many times do people take it away and it doesn't even get published? It ends up on a report on some hard drive somewhere that I don't even see. And when I do see it, I certainly don't agree with most of what's being said. So I think it's really important that we take co-produced research more seriously. But the outcome of that is, of course, then clinicians find it very hard to accept. But if we're genuinely going to embrace lived experience, co-production, co-creation and co-design, we've got to find new ways of delivering research that embraces participatory action research, co-produced research methodologies, and bring our communities with us, because they are the ones who are feeling the change, living the change, and being the change to transform their communities. I think that's probably enough, isn't it? Is that enough, Nick?
That's when you finished.
Well, I haven't finished, but we said we were going to leave time for questions. And I think I should probably finish there. So, yeah, it's 6:15. I think it's